All right, so this is our second try at doing this. First time I made a mistake and I screwed up, and I ended up, we had a power outage, and I guess that's what screwed up my recording of us discussing this awesome book. But I'm here with Cujo from GI Joburg, and
And other various. Oh, I'm sorry, brother. Go
no,
ahead.
you're good. Go ahead.
No, well, I want to hear your elaborate introduction of myself. So I don't want to stop that.
No, you're good.
No, I roll with Joburg and Squid Nova. If you're looking for weird conversations with dynamic sound, run me down in 30 minutes of diabolical.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll find me in Joburg or with Joburg allies like this gentleman Strydent.
Yep. Yeah. So how is life in general? I know we already we kind of went over it, but for the audience at home,
No,
how is
I don't mind a remix, brother. You know, dude, in America, everything feels day to day.
I know, right? Yeah,
So, how's the Midwest treating you? I mean, I'm
it's
on the
good.
West Coast. If you're listening, you know, everybody out here's nuts. Enough said.
I think that's everywhere, man.
It's contagious, apparently.
Yeah. Nah, I'm just trying to like my days off are Sundays and Mondays, so it's so weird having a weekday as a day off. So I'm trying to, get as much done as I can and still get that relaxation. So this is my lazy Monday.
I'm honored, dude.
But yeah, man, I'm glad to finally get back with you and sit here and geek out about some GI Joe comics. So today we are going to talk about, as the title says, we're going to talk about GI Joe Infestation. It was pretty cool, and the reason why we decided to do this is because we've talked back and forth about good GI Joe stories, like modern ones. Everyone knows the Hama stuff is really good. I mean, it's like the blueprint, and everybody knows that there's some other gems scattered throughout the Marvel Comics run, but modern stories seem to be kind of limited, especially right now. So this was one of the ones that was unique. It's not the best, like, in everything, but it's a unique story, and I think it's worth talking about.
I think I mean, it captivates just with I think the leads, which are not well traveled characters. I mean, of course, Baroness gets a lot of screen time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry, a lot of time on the pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have a great feel for her motivations all the time. Do you, as a
No.
character in the book?
Nah, she just seems to flip-flop, like, whatever for the moment. Whatever suits her fancy for the moment, that's what she's all about. That's what she's into. So it's kind of strange that they...
Well, Hama. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's kind of strange that sometimes they don't lock that down for her so that we know exactly, always know exactly what it is that she's up to, what her ultimate goal is.
Well, I mean, maybe I jumped ahead a little bit. I mean, you're right to kind of point out that GI Joe has become like a pocket of different little fan bases,
Yeah.
just with the book reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess before we kick things off, we're not talking art. We're not talking art yet, though. Okay.
No, not yet.
Um.
But I mean, if you want to
Okay.
throw in something, you can. We can
Yeah,
go in
no,
more
that's all right.
detail.
Um. And I agree. Like I let's see, where can we edit in? I'll just say, oh, you don't do editing. All right, but edit that little bit. I'm sure. More GI Joe's obscure tales along the way. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to be chatting you up.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. Um. So I guess we can kind of start with what's the premise of this book.
I'm
I
just listening to airplanes on my end. Can you hear that ambient noise? Are we cool?
No, it's cool. It's real quiet on
All
my
right.
side.
I guess the premise of this book, it's a pretty encapsulated tale. The people involved are either the storyline is essentially resolved by the end of the story.
Yeah.
It's a two-parter. I guess it does bleed over, as IDW has gotten kind of famous for. It
Exactly.
bleeds into other series, but it does have an encapsulated tale, which I think we're focusing on now.
Yeah.
It's just a character study, honestly.
Yeah. And so the overall premise is that the Joes find a piece of wreckage that's kind of I want to say sentient, you know, and this sentient piece of wreckage connects with the systems inside a Cobra, you know, base, like an oceanic Cobra base, and it kind of turns all their gear, all their bats, because there's experiments on new types of bats and whatnot, and it turns all of this stuff into almost like zombies, and so you end up having this kind of, you know, a couple Cobras and a couple Joes, well, actually one Joe, versus all this Cobra experimental stuff that has been turned into, you know, killing machines, essentially. I mean, they're already designed to do that, but now they're working against their creators, essentially. And it's just cool because you have, just like a horror movie, you have your location, and your location is somewhere kind of isolated. You're out at sea. Actually, you're underwater in this base. And you have a threat that's inside, like you said, encapsulated. The story's encapsulated, the characters are encapsulated, and they're trying to fight this threat and, you know, escape with their lives, you know? And it's kind of cool because it's not something that you typically get from GI Joe. I mean, I can't really remember ever getting like a horror movie, you know, style GI Joe story. Even with Chemical Z and stuff, I can't remember Chemical Z ever showing up in the comics. I know Cesspool showed up and he fought with toxic sludge and whatnot, but
the line art didn't seem nearly as dark as it did in this book.
Yeah. Andrew Wildman, man, I like his art, but it's more on the cartoony side. It's bright and it's dynamic, and it's more traditional comic book stuff, and not so much like Bernie Wrightson, you know, EC Comics horror type stuff. Whereas this was going for that. I just don't think that the artist was necessarily 100% the best choice for that style. Because I could, in my mind, I imagine things a little bit more.
Well, no. if you're, I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, go ahead.
If you're a fan of horror and a fan of GI Joe, there's not much to go off of. I mean, I know IDW teases every once in a while with a Scooby Doo cover and stuff, which was completely fake news. But this book is probably as close as you're going to get to a horror story.
Yep.
And so I think it's a good one to kick off the GI Joe comic fireside chats, or whatever we're calling this.
Yeah.
But no, I agree. I like it being kind of like, if you're a fan of Rapture or Bioshock, you're always kind of hungry for how people are going to portray life underwater. And you know, if it's Cobra, you got all sorts of unsanctioned experimentations and stuff that they think can never escape. So it's a hell of a venue for a fight.
I agree. Excuse me. Wow. Let's talk characters.
Let's do it.
So the main characters in the book are the Baroness. She's at sea with a bunch of eels, and they're doing something. I don't even remember what her immediate. Or they're trying to get the piece of wreckage from the Joes.
Well, the set piece is like a yacht, which, I mean, the one thing, like, I can be critical of IDW's artwork. If I ever start criticizing their color work, then I've lost my way, because they do a great job painting like how you should feel about a certain page.
Oh yeah, like setting the mood and all that. Yeah, you're right.
The lighting is always great. But yeah, it's basically they acquire that tech from the yacht, and then the rest of it takes place basically like an interrogation room for a while. Yeah.
So you have Baroness, you have Psych-out, you have briefly the interrogator, like you said, but it's not the classic interrogator like that we all like from the figures. It's kind of just like a interrogator, I guess.
They're still trying to figure out how to do that guy right.
I know, it's weird. You'd think by now they would just be looking at the figures and saying, hey, let's just put that guy in there, you know?
Well, I kind of feel like she would be a great, or I'm sorry, that character would be like a great boss reveal, you know, kind of like a Leia take off the helmet and you're like, oh, what's going on?
Yeah, I think that'd be cool.
But sorry to derail you. Yeah, there is some good Baroness conversations with with eels, which you don't get much of
Yeah,
if you're looking for that.
that's true. Yeah, and just seeing them together because typically she's, you know, like globe trotting, you know, in a some kind of high speed transport, some kind of you know, flying something or other. And here you have her underwater in a kind of a leadership position, like she's commanding a squad, and she's pretty much commanding the whole operation because she's the only Cobra face character that you see in this whole thing. So
Sure.
it's
Well, they
kind
do a
of
nice job of letting you know a couple times in the book that nobody can get to the space for several hours, even if there is something the matter.
exactly, exactly. So yeah, we have her, we have Psych-out, we have the uninterrogator, we get eels. I love the eels. The eels are pretty dope. You get Dr. Zeich or Zyke, I think her name is. She's this wheelchair-bound professor or doctor of robotics, and
It feels like she's been compromised. I don't want to tip too much, but she was a character I had not seen before, created for the book. Were you under that impression?
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Her whole shtick feels like pre. I don't know how to put it. She feels like a precursor to Overkill because her character kind of that's what I get from her.
Well, I mean, she might be a great opportunity for like a convention figure that might blindside people.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a very, very rare opportunity there.
That's true. Like if they did one where she's like in the wheelchair, but then you could also like take off, you know, parts swap certain things to make her look like Overkill. That'd be awesome.
Definitely.
I just don't see them doing it. That's the problem.
No.
But yeah, I think as far as characters go, that's it. I mean, there's some Vipers, maybe one or two that actually kind of make it, but that's it.
I honestly, like, when I think about like who I'd like to see in role, am I derailing, brother?
No,
Are we staying strictly to the book? Okay.
No, you're good. Go ahead. It's free flowing.
When I think about like the heart of the book, the wheelchair bound, what are we calling her? Kind of a scientist.
Yeah.
She's definitely an important character. The people in the interrogation room, that conversation is rich, and I'm always trying to see who or cast basically the interrogator and all that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the set piece, you know, the underwater lab is the real star of the show.
Oh yeah, it kind of gives you that. It's kind of like not people's favorite, but I dug the setting, the upside down underground base in the first Resident Evil. Actually, it was in I think the second one too. How there were like so many levels going. It was like the Hive, I think, is what it was called. And
sure.
It was going underground. Kind of had that kind of vibe to it, except this made sense. You know, all the way through. It was consistently, you know, sensible. It wasn't like just nonsense, you know. But yeah, everything's closed off. They do make a good, you know, they do a good job letting you know that they're isolated and no one's going to be able to help them. They gotta figure this out themselves. And essentially, the Joes, there's like two kind of, I guess, throwaway Joes in the very beginning. They get killed off like straight away. During the interrogation scene, you actually see one of them being killed in the water, in the, you know, outside of the glass, you know, where in the room where the interrogation room. And I guess they're using that as a technique to try to scare Psych-out. But since Psych-out is their, what would you say, strategist slash, what's the word I'm looking for?
I mean, like Chuckles in that Cobra GI Joe book, Psych-out is not very well traveled as a character. Yeah. I mean, many people know him from the file card that actually slings real psychology at you.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's a character which you kind of have been waiting for him to be in an interrogation or to see what kind of, you know, intellect he can kind of banter with people.
Yeah.
He keeps it pretty bare bones. I mean, I don't want to tip the hand of that conversation.
Yeah. No, we won't.
Did you like his portrayal?
Yeah, I mean, he seemed cool. I mean, he didn't seem like a hard-ass, you know, field, you know, like wet work style Joe.
Yeah.
But he definitely felt like he was the intellectual equal of Baroness and the interrogator because he didn't break under pressure, regardless of what was going on. He pretty much, it was tit for tat, you know, as far as them trying to play mind games with him to, you know, freak him out and scare him into, you know, giving away information, and he just wasn't having any of that shit. So that was pretty cool to see.
He must have read Donald Trump's Art of the Deal. Just playing around. No, I mean, the awesome thing about when two great minds bounce off each other is nobody gives ground, but they both, at the end of it, you know, they have respect for each other, which is all you really want to see from that scene, and you definitely get it.
True. Very true. So when the kind of, we call this when me and my homeboy Prime are writing, you know, our stuff, we call it the shit breaking moment, is when the piece of wreckage turns out to be somewhat sentient, and it connects into the systems in the, you know, this Cobra base, and then everything starts going nuts. And I know you're big into like animal companions and whatnot, and there's a bunch of animals in this, you know, this facility that you can see are being experimented on and have, you know, some of them have their brains exposed, and it's like, it's kind of jacked up. But there's one in particular, you pointed it out to me last time we were talking about this.
Well, I mean, I think I know who you're talking about. Mm-hmm. I did kind of hit up the writer of the book on Twitter a little bit.
Oh, you did?
Because, well, just to inquire what his different thoughts were on stuff.
Uh-huh.
I mean, unfortunately, not everybody is forthcoming about their work as you'd hope they'd be.
I know.
But he did mention, like, oh, Christ, what was he mentioning? I may have led us down a dead end. No, but he did kind of take you into one of maybe GI Joe's more harrowing set pieces, at least in my recollection. And dude, you're right. I mean, I definitely have animal companions around. But they mention one of the birds by name. They call it Raptor.
Yeah.
And it's the bird that actually springs them to get out of that sticky situation.
Yep.
Which that in and of itself, if you're telling an animal companion's origin story, that's good enough for me. I mean, I'll drop money for that.
It's just cool because it meant that, unlike some of the other modern writers, he actually was aware of like the connection. You know what I'm saying?
I see you trying to trick me into a conversation.
No. I'm not. I'm just throwing out that, like, you know, because we both feel like that about some of the modern IDW stuff. We're just like, oh man.
Well, it's one thing to, because I mean, like, I understand you have to push a brand forward and times change, and I definitely am not the guy yelling at kids to get off my lawn, so to speak. But like, it is a little insulting, especially when you have somebody like Hama, who's a pillar of integrity, at least on the surface.
Yeah.
And they don't even bother to pay his work homage before they build a structure on top of it.
Exactly. And that's a lot of
comics. So
comics.
you're just kind of like, well, if you don't respect who came before, what are you asking of me?
Yeah. And that's how I feel.
I mean, that's what it is, bare bones.
That's what I feel about a lot of modern comics. I mean, DC and Marvel have been doing that for years, where it's like every couple months or maybe every year, they get a new creative team, and the new creative team is so eager to create their own legend or their own shtick that they just ignore the shit that came beforehand. And you're like, wait a second, like, that was important stuff. That's history for the character. I mean, at least, you know, respect it.
If you wanted, like, to read a sci-fi book, you'd read a sci-fi book. But people that lean on GI Joe, the military speaks to them through some way in their life. So, I mean, I don't know about, like, I've grappled with this on a couple different fandoms, Star Wars being one. Because, I mean, now, in an age where there's so much connected, you know, you're connected to culture, you can see brands evolve. So, I mean, you can either like it or dislike it. I mean, in this current era of GI Joe. But, I mean, talking, just kind of dovetailing back into the book, what do you think about, like, the artwork of this book? I mean, we've mentioned it conveys kind of like that creep show when it's working at its best.
Yeah.
Did you feel the characters? Did you feel like when you saw Psych-out, did it make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that it's a very loose kind of style. I mean, when they need to kind of home in on something, especially, you know, the setting, they do a really good job with that. But the characters seem really loose, you know. It's all about like shadows and the idea, but not like clear form. You know what I mean? And I don't know if that's me, if that sounds weird for people who
Yeah.
aren't artists, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like you see, what do they call this in school? I'll get technical. They call it modulation. Instead of actually drawing or blocking out shapes, instead of actually drawing the form, you know, even if you do it with light or you choose to do it with line and shape, the characters are not defined. You know, you see a viper, and by the colors and by the placement of certain things, you know it's a viper. But when you look at the actual drawing, a lot of the actual hard details are missing. Or like on the Baroness, you know, her design keeps on, like certain things pop into focus and then other things don't. And so when you see her in one scene, her costume looks one way. You see her in another scene, you know, it's kind of inconsistent. It doesn't feel 100% the same if you're looking for details. But I think the coloring holds it all together. The coloring's masterful. It's just the pencil work it's good in some scenes and it's off in others. I don't know if that was a time constraint thing, you know, because like even when you look at these bats, they're very nondescript. They kind of look like iRobot, like that's the vibe that you get with the big chunks of plastic and then the wires and servos where the joints should be.
Yeah.
But I can't really tell, like if I was to sit down and draw them, I can't really make out some of these details for me to reproduce them. I mean, there's a shot where they're side by side in the background and they look different. Each of them look different, but the same general, you know, large pieces are there. So, you know, it's very, you know, meh. Not to be mean,
Well,
but you know.
no, I think what like I mean, and this is kind of if you're a kind of an independent artist, this is something that you deconstruct in your mind because you're always picking up styles from other people's line work, and you're like, oh, these people are professionals, etc. To me, like I'll continue, like I'll say what I said earlier, that the color is the only thing that's keeping GI Joe afloat in most books. I don't mind the line art. I've really enjoyed John Royal's covers recently.
Oh yeah,
on
he's awesome.
IDW.
Yeah, he's awesome.
If he gets to know the brand a little bit better, I got his back all the way.
Same here.
But there's definitely one thing that's surfaced since I've started kind of like deconstructing the mystery of GI Joe, and that is that it's definitely about culture because like the action figures had so much culture on them, whether it was muted or not.
Yeah.
You had details, and the fan base, that's what they still roll with.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. Like the characters, if the artist is doing them and he's not, you know, deep in the brand, he better have a figure in his hand or something like that. Because it just when it's loose, it just looks like cheesy.
I agree. But I will say, to their credit, even with that looseness, you're still so the mood is set so well, and you know, obviously that's super in part due to the coloring. That
well, it is stripped down too. I mean, like you're in an interrogation room is the primary setting, so like, you know, Psych-out doesn't have radar dishes on him; he has handcuffs on him, so it's a little more straightforward. Art-wise.
Well, and like things like, you know, their vests. You know, like when you look at each of the Joes, each Joe has gear on, and a lot of the gear has, you know, character to it. Even if it's realistic, real world stuff, or if it's not, it has some kind of, you know, style to it that is 100% that character. You know, so when you see it, if you were to see a panel and all you see is like, you know, Sci-Fi's boot, we would know based on the color and the style of that boot, like that's Sci-Fi. You know what I'm saying? It's just like when you see superheroes, you know, it's like visual recognition, and that's why they're designed that way. That's why I tell people when I see customs where they turn very distinct designs into just grunts with the weapon that guy had, I'm like, you just missed the point. They're like super heroic soldiers, and they still have very specific visual cues so that you never forget who that character is. You know, you'll always recognize that character. But
well, let me ask you a taste question.
Yeah,
you mentioned the bats look kind of basic B.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny, actually. But does that, like, if they would have basically thrown in like the old school version of the bat, maybe without his black shirt on, that kind of thing on, just kind of a stripped down version of that, would that have invited you into the story a little bit more?
It could have. It feels like they were going for the. There was like during the new sculpt era, there was a 5-pack. I actually have it, and I'm gonna review it soon. It was called the uh, Bat Attack 5-pack. It came with Overkill. It came with 2 of the standard new sculpt era bats with the arms that you can take off, and there's like a sword, and there's a like a.
Did,
You know what
does
I'm
the
talking about?
bat come with like a huge kind of like compression chamber on one of his guns?
Yeah, one of them does have like a green glowy tube on his arms, and it felt like that was what they were channeling. The problem is that they just didn't go all the way. They simplified so much that it doesn't feel like any version of the bat that we have in our collections. And you know, with GI Joe, be like once again, with every character being so distinct, I want some of that to show up here. You know what I mean? Like I want to feel like I know this stuff when I see it. So like if they didn't tell you it was a bat, you know, you wouldn't know. You would kind of have to fill in the blank yourself. So
The way that they conveyed him on the pages, I agree with you. Like they should have like went with a more classic design.
yeah,
But I mean, they still were intimidating when they kind of came down as kind of like a zombie mob in the hallway. Because I kind of conveyed them as well. I'll let you read it in the pages, but they convey them as something of like kind of clumsy, still dangerous but clumsy.
exactly. Yeah, so like, you know, like I said, some of the stuff, the tone works, the overall thing works, but you know, my artist brain is like, why didn't you do this? You know what I mean? Because there's so many versions of the bats. You could have chosen one, stripped it down to look like it's in progress. You know, they haven't finished it yet, and it would still give you the same feel, and it would also give you the visual recognition. This is a bat. You know, without them telling you in world, in universe, this is a bat. Because you know that, like you said earlier, that's kind of part of the you know, the details are what makes these characters. The details are what drives the fan base. You know, so if you skip the details, then you kind of aren't really doing. You're not doing yourself or the fan base any favors. But overall, though, even if I don't nitpick, the design of these robots is still kind of creepy enough that it works. You know, they do look like formidable in numbers, formidable enemies for these characters that are stuck on this in this base.
Well, they're essentially like an unstoppable, you know, like masked murder in a horror movie. They just keep coming.
Mm-hmm.
It does. I mean, it does kind of humanize the Vipers. You know, we were talking about. I guess since we're talking about art, this isn't exclusive to IDW, and if people want to jump in the conversation down below, I'm just curious: are people kind of like the idea of like 4 covers? Is that played? Do people enjoy that? And I guess I'm throwing that your question your way too, because I get weary of trying to keep up with organizing my books with all these covers. I do want to pay homage to artists that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it does kind of make the book more basic because it loses its identity. A cover artist usually kind of frames what you're going to find in the book.
Yep.
And if there's 4 different interpretations, I'm just not feeling it. How are you feeling about it at this point?
I feel the same way. I mean, and it's because of, you know, getting that from Marvel, where you see a cover, it's by an artist that you love, and you know, while you're in this, like back when I was a kid, I used to buy comics from the corner store, and the owner didn't let us sit there and read the comic in the store. He's just like, pick it up, buy it, or put it down. Yeah. So
a businessman.
Yeah, exactly. And it was on the East Coast too, so they weren't playing. They were like straight up, you know, rude as hell. I'm like, just get, you know, get it or get the fuck out. And I'm like, okay, all right, you know. So I got accustomed to, you know, quickly, you know, pinpointing the styles I like and then just picking up the book and then reading it once I've bought it. But a lot of times I would buy books from Marvel, especially like I was big into X-Men. buy X-Men books, and it'd be like 50 different covers, you know, for one issue. And I'm like, it's not even a milestone issue. And each cover was a different artist. And you're thinking, oh, you know, Andy Kubert did this cover, so that he must have done the interior, you know, because it didn't say on the cover who the interior artist was. So I pick it up, I open it up, and it's like some unknown that's nowhere near, you know, Kubert's pedigree. So I hate that. Like it turns me off to a lot of books, you know, let alone, like you said, when you try to organize your books and you've got one issue with 5 covers. It's like, why? Especially when it's just like some piece of a bigger story, or just a regular one-off issue that's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. It's almost like, why? Why did we need so many covers?
I mean, not to try and solve the world's problems. I mean, it feels like there's more intuitive ways that they could do this and actually make more money doing it. But I mean, that's probably a conversation for another day.
Well, let them know about the idea you had, though. You had that good idea about...
Well, I mean, I just think, like, kind of the meshing of that feeling you used to get when you bought a pack of cards, whatever you were into. Were you a card collector back in the day?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Turtle cards, Batman, football, baseball, hockey.
You weren't breaking open packs to find a Manziel rookie?
Oh, yeah. I definitely was. Because I would always buy doubles.
Well, dude, I don't think you heard me. I just said Johnny Manziel.
Oh,
I thought that would get you.
My bad. I missed it.
Yeah. My God. Humanity. No, but you know what would be cool is kind of like a blind artist grab. Like, I've been toying with different ways to convey digital comics and stuff like that. But if you just slipped in a frame from an artist, could be any field, anything, but like the writer goes, oh, I'd like to see, you know, any artist do one frame in this book. And then you could take that single frame and market it, you know. You could sell it as a print and stuff like that. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be an action frame. You could have like a classic artist, an impressionist, do like a one shot of Baroness or something. Yeah, just anything strange. But put it in the book so when you buy the book, you don't know what you're getting. There could be like 5 different versions.
That's true.
And you could have Banksy do like a shot of Zartan. You know, who knows?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, it would be cool because, I mean, some of these guys, some of the best artists, like, not every artist fits every type of comic. So, like,
you know, that's an interesting thread. Please continue.
Yeah, because, like, you know, that there's some action books, like, for instance, and I know we're like I guess we're not really way off, but I was big into the Ultimates when it first came out. And I like Brian Hitch's artwork because if it's a big, important blockbuster type deal, he's the guy you want because he can do large scale, you know, carnage and just, you know, he can make the book feel epic. He can do that easily. And he'll make it feel like it's a film. The way he frames his shots and the costuming, and especially if he's allowed to design his own stuff as opposed to having to follow the classic whatever. He makes things feel very grandiose and very epic. But like people like Jim Mahfood, you don't want him drawing the Ultimates. Like, his style is more towards the quirky, more character-driven, you know, not superhero stuff, I guess is what I'm saying. You know, so like superhero. No, go ahead.
Well, we're watching an age where, just to take the brand of GI Joe, it's being reinvented visually. You know, whether you enjoy it or not.
Yeah.
I might forget where I'm headed here, but I mean that is a question worth asking. Can a franchise that is beloved for one reason change? And I mean, from what I'm seeing, like you may be dazzled with like Star Wars portrayal. I'm sorry, Disney's portrayal of Star Wars, but I mean, if you're asking me, it's lost something.
Yeah, it's more of a general audience feel. They're trying to please everyone.
I mean, I don't know if you want me to drop a firebomb in our fireside chat.
Hey, go ahead.
But like classic George Lucas Star Wars, Lucas was trying to break the system, and you can chop that narrative up a million ways, but it's true. And now Star Wars is just about entertainment.
Yeah.
But when GI Joe started, Hama snuck one by the advisors, or he snuck one by the
Editorial.
people that, because he dropped some fire that's relevant now.
Yeah.
So I wish that I noticed. I think it was HasCon. No, it may have been Comic Con. IDW repped their artists on certain Joe books. I think Citizen got a platform. And then maybe an artist or two. I'm not sure. But they said nothing. There was no conversation around Hama. And that's from the official, IDW Twitter account.
Yeah.
There may have been something on Facebook, but I did search. And so, like, you can definitely tell IDW is trying to push a different direction.
Yeah.
But that's the question that remains. Can you strip a franchise of its essence and still call it that?
Yeah, I don't think it's successful. I mean, there's people buying the books, don't get me wrong. I mean, obviously, but it doesn't feel like the people, people I know, I don't know any hardcore, GI Joe fans that really know what's going on, really being excited.
I'm not going to speculate. I just don't think that there's like a clear direction. And I think that IDW's expecting the writers and the artists to promote the book, but not really kind of explaining how to include the fan base in that process.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'll see where it goes. But just to wrap things up on Infestation, our GI Joe horror story.
Yep.
Oh, good, a jet's going overhead. Probably some real GI Joes headed off into battle. But no, since we're underwater, how did this story? It does end a couple characters' plot lines, or it does end a couple characters along the way. Were you kind of satisfied with the arc through these two issues?
Yeah, it felt very self-contained. I like self-contained stories. I always get overwhelmed when it just goes on and on and on and on and on forever. Unless each issue is freaking amazing, I don't feel the need to keep it going forever. But yeah, it wrapped up well. I mean, Psych-out was in a kind of a no-win situation, and they handled it properly. Baroness, she always seems to be able to slink out of whatever situation she's
Pivot,
in.
Brother. Pivot. That's what they call it in politics.
Yeah, exactly. And she did that, and it felt like. It felt plausible. It felt like this is probably what she would do in this situation, I don't know if this is an in-canon story. It almost feels like a side story, but if it's in canon, I mean, shit. It just seems like another notch on her belt as far as, crazy shit she went through and managed to survive.
Well, I mean, great storytelling. You can almost frame anybody as the main character. And I don't know if you're watching Game of Thrones over there in Middle America, but
yeah,
damn.
That's part of my.
I echo that sentiment. If you're looking for a serious Joe book, and when I say serious, I just mean that you feel like you're in the Joe world, or at least maybe an old school fan's appreciation of it.
Yeah.
I like it, and it shouldn't set you back too much. You can probably find those two books in a long box somewhere if you're crafty.
Yeah, very true.
I wouldn't mind also kind of maybe mixing in a dialogue along the way. Once again, if you're on board with Strydent, let's get a dialogue going about the current GI Joe, or I'm sorry, the current IDW iteration of Hama. I'm wondering if his voice has changed in between the two companies,
Yeah, it's possible. I think now, before he was hungry, and he wasn't like, he had freedom, but he wasn't, I don't think he was 100% free to say everything. He had to be clever how he said it. Now, he's got so much clout and so much respect from, the fan base and everything, because we know he's responsible for all this stuff. You say that, but the guy is still doing interviews like in modified garages and stuff. Like, really?
He's well. I mean, you've seen like the interviews. There's like rolling, garage doors behind him and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that's a bad venue to be at.
Yeah.
I can't tell, and I mean, I usually dabble in this more on GI Joburg. But like, I am consumed to a degree with the conspiracy of GI Joe. And I do believe that there is plenty of symbology in there. But like, I just think it's odd that he, like some other creators, but he seems kind of just aloof and respectful of his situation at this point.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like the real Hama has said too much into a microphone.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Zek is real conservative too, so like it's interesting to kind of see these people that have fleshed out a real American hero, because I mean those pages are important and they're only getting more important as the years get later. So
true. I think it's you know, I know a lot of comic book artists and a lot of artists in general, and one thing I noticed in the comic book world is being quiet and being like this, I don't want to say manufactured, but there's this generic version of being humble that they all, like so many comic book artists and writers have. I mean, there's a very select few
I feel you.
that like really tell it how it is. Like Arthur Adams will just tell you how it is. What's the dude's name? Jeff Darrow. I met him a couple years back at Chicago, and we talked for a minute. Like, he just tells it how it is. He explains how he was so hopped up on speed while he was drawing stuff for The Matrix and stuff for Big Guy and Rusty. Because if you look at his artwork, it's like layer upon layer upon layer of line work. He doesn't really cross-hatch or anything else. And he explains how much work he had to do to get minimal attention. Like, the book came out, people liked it. I think he got an Eisner or something for it. He got an award for it, and then it was gone. But when you look at the sheer amount of work that went into it, it's like, damn, he's got to have more to say about this. You know what I mean? They're missing something. And when you talk to him, he'll go at length and let you know. So maybe that's what it is.
I definitely think we're in a renaissance as far as the independent artist is concerned. And I mean, and just I don't want to keep I don't want to lengthen this out or turn it into some kind of like ramen seminar.
You're good.
No, I think that like the people that we've seen excel in this era through this iteration of social media have definitely embraced expressing themselves. I think a lot of artists or writers are probably introverts and not comfortable with that process or think it may betray them, and it definitely could.
Yeah, it could.
I'm just hoping, and again, it's usually about where the community's at and if people really want something or not.
True.
I'm definitely interested in what's going to happen next, or how people will take GI Joe next, because I know we don't have any figures for a couple years.
Very true.
We're basically going to have whatever IDW kicks out. So it's an interesting time for GI Joe. What's that noise? It sounds like you're racing over there.
That was I was restarting because I had stopped recording, and then I added more, a little bit more, gave us a little bit more time so that we can
overtime
finish up. Yeah, exactly.
Reload. You should just add that reload in every time we.
That would be dope. From like time crisis or whatever. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Well, dude, that was kind of like the end of the arcade era, and you just walk by and you hear that reload.
No, I love that stuff, man.
It's time to get back into the fight.
Yeah, exactly.
What's going on with you this week?
Nah, I'm just gonna be working. I'm gonna do more sketches for the thing we're working on.
Just off your technique.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've been working on my own stuff, so it's cool to switch gears and just draw soldier type stuff, because my book is all superheroic stuff. It's superheroes and, Well,
I was actually going to agree with you on the podcast. It's not really important, but, like, you're totally right. Like, it takes, like, when you can't draw GI Joes as superheroes. You can't do them, like, jumping static, like, among Autobots and stuff. Like, you're like, that person's going to roll their ankle. I mean, like, sure, like, somebody can do like a leap off a tank or something.
Yeah.
But I just, like, the whole thing about GI Joe is, at least in my opinion, is people have to feel the weight of what's going on.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. It's not a military book.
Yeah. They have to feel tactical. Yeah. And I think that's the piece that's missing from many of the newer artists, is that it's like they've shifted the designs and the characters to fit their aesthetic, and they didn't do it the other way around. Like, GI Joe existed before you, before me. So when we get in there, we can put our spin, but we still got to stay true to what what existed.
It's so bad. It's so bad. All right. Oh, do you want to do a quick sign out?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. If you're recording. All right.
Yeah, we're recording.
Okay. You want me to sign out and then you can kind of close it?
Sure. Sure.
All right. Yeah. So basically, if you see our names pop up on Strydent's very informative, not controversial at all channel. I don't know. I don't know if you have haters, but hopefully someday.
Oh, I got him. I got him.
Yeah. But no, we'll be talking Joe comics in any of their iterations. If you want conversation around a certain thread, hit us up. I'm flexible. I just want to talk good Joe character-driven stories.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, this one is a good one to check out. I mean, I know we were all over different aspects of the comic and the industry itself, but yeah, it's a good one to check out. It's not perfect, so it may not suit everyone's fancy, but it's a good one to check out, and it kind of brings up questions that you probably may have never thought about in the Joe universe. So yeah, check this out, and yeah, we're going to be doing more of these for sure.
You can run me down on Twitter at 86 Cujo. I'm usually on there way more than I should be, but I'm not really anywhere else. So
yeah,
hit me up there, run me down in other podcast forms if you choose to. And thank you, brother, for inviting me to Columbus. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, we're in Columbus.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
thank you, Strydent.
No problem. Thanks for doing this with me. Yeah, we're gonna try to do more of these and find some, pick out these random stories. You know what one I want to do next? Real quick before we close, I want to do. I think it was Cobra Command when Chuckles joins Cobra undercover. You remember that? Like, to me, that was one of the best.
Of course. One
of the best GI Joe stories. Period. The tone was insane, and then the fact that Word Burglar was able to make a complete song that just gives you the entire story, almost beat for beat. It's fucking amazing, man. So yeah, I wanna do that one next. So
I'm pretty sure Word Burglar is going to be at quite possibly the last Joe Con. If you're even a casual GI Joe fan, see what your funds look like, see what your schedule looks like. Yeah. Late June, it could be quite a party.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to be there. But yeah,
you're gonna be there, brother.
Yeah,
you're gonna be there.
I will. But yeah, as always, that's our story, and we're sticking to it. And I guess I will see you guys on the next video. So peace outside.